Good evening. I'd like to call the October 18, 2021 meeting of the University Heights City Council to order. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Here.
Mrs. Berry?
Here.
Mrs. Pardee? Mrs. Weiss?
Here.
Mr. Ertl?
Here.
Mr. Rock?
Here.
Mr. Gould?
Here. Is there a motion to excuse Mrs. Pardee?
So moved. Second.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Gould, second by Mrs. Weiss. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Ertl?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye. Okay, Mrs. Pardee is excused. Will all those who are able please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 4 is approval of minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
What are you moving, Mr. Ertl? Let me, before we
For which set?
entertain that, Mrs. Thomas, do we have sets of minutes distributed?
We have 3 sets of minutes
Yeah.
distributed.
Okay. What are the dates?
We have June 28th,
June 28th?
July, I don't have that printout. Which one was it, July? Was it?
I have it in the Dropbox.
I need help. Which 3 did I put in the Dropbox? It was
Yeah, I'm taking a look.
June 28th, and there were the meetings in July, special meetings in July.
Mhm.
There were 2 special meetings in July.
There was 9/20. One, June 21st. June 21st, June 28th, and September?
No, July.
Six 2199,
Yeah.
and then recently placed in, we also had a 628 and 818, and then into Dropbox today was 923.
And those are ones you can table. The 923 you can table.
Well, why don't we just take them one at a time? Is there a motion with respect to the minutes of June 21st, 2021?
So moved.
Motion to approve by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Any discussion? Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Ertl? Aye. Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Okay, very good. Minutes are approved. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the special meeting of June 28th, 2021?
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Rock. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry? Aye. Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Ertl? Aye. Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the special meeting of August 18, 2021?
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Blankfeld. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Weiss. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry? I was absent. Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Ertl? Aye. Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of September 9, 2021?
So moved.
Okay, motion to approve by Mr. Ertl. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Second was by Mrs. Weiss.
I'm sorry, what was the date on that one? September what?
9th.
9th, okay.
Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee? I'm sorry, Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Erdl?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Abstain?
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
And then with respect to the minutes of September 23rd, is there a motion either to approve or to table?
I'll make the motion to table.
Okay, motion to table by Mrs. Blankfeld of the minutes of September 23rd, 2021. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Weiss. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Erdl?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Okay, those minutes are tabled. We are now on to comments from the audience. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes. Total time allowed is 15 minutes per meeting unless otherwise permitted by Council Ordinance 91-25. Is there anybody here this evening who would care to address the city? If so, please approach the podium and state your name and address for the record, and you may have up to 5 minutes. I see Mr. Miller's approaching, so we will start there.
Good evening. The name is Paul Miller. I live at 2370 Charney Road. Lived here for 43 years. Just one quick thing in regards to the electric scooters. I want everyone on council to know a couple of things. New York City just passed a revised ordinance in regards to those. It's not 16 years old, it's 18 years old. That's how old you have to be. That's number one. Number two is you have to go through a training class in order to drive one, if you want to call it. Drive, ride, whatever you want to call it. And the third is you have to take a quiz. You have to take a test to see if you're qualified, like we do in our driving test. I suggest if you're going to do anything in regards to that, take a real good look at. They've had a number of accidents. Granted, it's not New York City, it's University Heights. But you know what? Those rules and regulations that they're now putting in place, they seem logical and rational to do. 16 is too young. And they go 15 miles an hour. You do not want to get hit by something that's going 15 miles an hour. You just don't want it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Miller. Is there anybody else who'd care to address the city? Yes, you may come up. And please state your name and address for the record, and you may take up to 5 minutes.
Hey everyone, my name is Max Malley. I'm a student at John Carroll University, a sophomore. I live at 1 John Carroll University. So I'm coming here today because I'm the chairman of the Community Relations and Service Committee for John Carroll Student Government. So a main focus of the committee this semester, this term, is to better our relations with the University Heights City Council and the city at large. So I view this committee as not only serving to help the students of John Carroll University get more acclimated to the city that we're in, but to bridge that relationship of the namesake along with the students within it. I'm not sure currently where the relationship stands, whether it's hostile or not, but I want to make sure as chairman that this city and this university have a relationship that is beneficial towards both. So far in this committee, we're brainstorming ways on how to get our committee more acclimated within the residents and city council altogether. We're thinking of ways to maybe bring a guest speaker into our campus, whether it's a member of council or an influential member within the city. I think as chairman, it would be very beneficial for all involved to have a better relationship. I don't want all of the city council and the city itself to know John Carroll University students as wandering through Warrensville at 2 in the morning on Saturday night. I want there to be more representation on a more positive scale and a more positive light. My other committee members here tonight could not be here, but their names are Maggie Paul, Thomas Keene, Sarah Brown, and Matt Baker. We all really relish this opportunity to work further with everyone here. And we think that our time at John Carroll University would be wasted if we don't introduce ourselves to City Council and just try to bridge a more wholesome relationship within the two entities. And I haven't been on John Carroll the longest. I'm only a sophomore. But I mean, I love the city. I see political signs all around, and I know that you guys really care for it too, or else you wouldn't be running for these positions and you wouldn't be serving here either. So I think in the best interest of all involved, us working together, us serving mutual interests, well, that's the name of the game, and I wish to further that starting here tonight. So thank you, all of you, and have a fantastic evening.
Well, very good. Thank you, Mr. Malley.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming here this evening. Is there anybody else who care to address the city this evening? If you could please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record. You may have up to 5 minutes.
My name is Chris Tunison. I reside at 2544 Traymore Road. I've been a resident for about 29 years here in this fair city. I had 2 items tonight. The first one I'd like to direct to Mr. Picorni in regards to a tree that is now again lopsided on the property at 2559 Traymore Road. It was shored up a few weeks ago. However, it's back at a 90-degree angle again. So if we could have a look at that versus losing that tree, that'd be great. And then the other item I have, it was something I had brought up probably a year or so ago in regards to the Walt, and there was some things taken care of over there in Fenwick in regards to putting stop signs, and because there was a lot of speeding going on. What I would like to discuss or have discussed with the safety committee is to take a look at portable speed tables or portable speed bumps. I know the mayor had mentioned before that during the winter, the snow trucks and plows would have difficulty, but these are an actual portable speed bump that can be pulled up as the weather gets bad. Just on my strip alone on Traymore from Meadowbrook to Tyndall is 0.2 miles, and there are vehicles that can get up to 40 to 50 miles an hour. There are over 30 children on our street, just in that 0.2 strip. I did a little homework. There's several other brands out there, but this one is called Bever, and it's a 9-foot strip, and it's about $112. So maybe something to be considered for the next budget year, and they can be pulled up in the fall as the weather gets worse, and then we don't have to have the plows beating them up. So I can give this to somebody. So I'd like that to be considered.
Yes, is our chief of police here? Maybe we could provide it to him, please. Thank you, Ms. Tunison. Is there anybody else who would care to address the city this evening? Going once, going twice. Very good. Then we will move on from the comments from the audience and move on to reports and communications from the mayor and the taking of action. University Heights' second Fall Fest was a success with music, circus acts, refreshments, balloons, bubbles, pumpkin painting, face painting, and over 60 tables with vendors and causes. Fall Fest 2021 was nearly twice the size of the first Fall Fest in 2019. An estimated 2,500 people attended. People were happy to be back out, and the renewed sense of community was unmistakable. It was great seeing all our neighbors out again. It was great seeing kids of all ages having fun. So many folks told me how happy they were to see an event of this magnitude in our city, and that they look forward to more. One resident told me that in over 30 years of living here, he'd never seen anything like it. That this was the event they'd been waiting for right here in our own park. The people like what we've been doing and they want more. We will plan for even more next year. Look for Fall Fest 3 next fall. Save the date, October 2nd, 2022. Thank you to our service department for helping set up, keeping things clean, and cleaning up after. Thank you to the police department for keeping a calming presence, though there were no significant incidents to speak of. Thank you to the fire department for bringing out the ladder truck, inspecting the food trucks for the safety first thing, and for their ever-friendly presence. Thank you to Communication and Civic Engagement Coordinator Mike Cook for the planning and implementation, the photos, the day of the event support and coordination of all sorts. And most of all, thank you to still new Special Projects Coordinator Ben Schaefer, whose wealth of experience and organizational skills were applied for the first time to a community festival. Ben started at City Hall in August and made this project his own, took responsibility, and was crucial to the success of the event. I have said many times that the people who work for the city are the city's greatest asset, and that showed here with this well-organized, community-building, fun event. On Friday, I signed the development agreement between the city and Congregation Zinkron Chaim for the construction of their new synagogue. We will be working with them to schedule the required pre-construction public meeting, which will most likely be here in this room. Demolition of the existing structures should commence this fall to begin the preparation of the site for construction. The administration has received an initial draft of the municipal facilities study from our consultants at GPD Group. The department heads and I are currently reviewing the study. Once we've made our administrative review, the study will remain in draft form for council review and input. From the draft, our consultants are recommending the relocation of the service yard, the construction of new fire and police facilities, and the construction of a new city hall, complete with community rooms and auditorium. Once constructed, University Heights will not only better serve our residents, but will be able to offer year-round senior programming and community programming, which has been long called for in our community. As administration, we know the demand is there, based upon the reception to our increased summer event programming, summer evening programming at Walter Stinson Community Park. I personally have visited the modern facilities in Newburgh Heights, Brecksville, Independence, and most recently in Westlake at their new community services building. To be there on a Thursday morning and observe so much activity among seniors, having coffee, meeting up for planned events, or just hanging out, as well as seeing the community rooms and new auditorium. We can envision here movie nights, presentations and guest speakers, games for seniors and kids of all ages. While we have had a long-standing arrangement with Cleveland Heights for our seniors to use their community center, having our own facilities will greatly enhance the experience of our residents who choose to age in place here in University Heights. Last week, University Realty USA LLC and the Alexander Schul defendants filed a lawsuit in federal court. The city was formally served today. The defendants asserted no new claims. They assert nothing that they had not already asserted last month in state court. The new filing was made in violation of our mutual agreement to mediate and to file no more court documents other than those to extend the TRO and formalize the mediation order until after we have had a mediation. There was no deadline that necessitated the filing of this additional court action. The state court already has jurisdiction. I was disappointed that the Alexander Schul defendants took this action. However, that does not change the city's position to seek mediation in an effort to bring this matter to resolution. Since 2018, my administration has sought to bring to the table Rabbi Schnur Zalman Denzinger and the Alexander Schul stakeholders. They disregarded our overtures for a meeting until we brought charges against University Realty USA LLC in Shaker Housing Court in 2019. Then, and only then, did they meet with us for the first time in September of 2019. And eventually, they would go to our City Planning Commission, where they missed their deadlines and requested repeatedly to be taken off the agenda in 2020. I will not recount here the full timeline since then. Suffice it to state, the following has been consistent. Actions by the city and this administration have been calculated to bring the Alexander Schul defendants to the table and to identify and resolve issues of public safety, including violations of the state building code and state fire code. For nearly 2 years now, the city has been aware that the lower level that has been used as a library and assembly room for over 100 people has only one means of egress. The basement area, used as an assembly room, had no fire exit, no fire extinguishers, open flame, and bowing exterior walls. As recently as this past summer, there were over 30 documented electrical violations, including dangling and exposed live wires. We learned this initially in April through the execution of an administrative search warrant. The house was then subject to an order to vacate by the building commissioner. In spite of that order, Rabbi Denzinger continued to hold daily meetings in a dangerous house, endangering members of the public who attended or otherwise entered the house. And during that time, the Alexander Schul defendants pulled no permits and made no repairs. The stipulated TRO, among other things, required them to resolve those electrical violations, promoting public safety before they could resume meeting in a limited capacity. They then pulled permits and made the electrical repairs. That didn't happen without our lawsuit in state court. Their refusal to act in their own self-interest and in the interest of their congregation, and refusal to voluntarily resolve these housing and building code issues necessitated the legal action taken by the city. While the Alexander Schul defendants have endeavored to reframe this case as one regarding religious freedom, this is and remains a case not only about residential zoning, but about the state building code. This city may not and cannot waive the building code. Having a certified building department, the state requires the city to enforce the building code. The city has a legal duty to enforce that code as a matter of law for reasons of public safety. When property owners do not respond to the city's letters or building department orders, that leaves the city with no recourse but to turn to the courts, as we do with all property owners who refuse to follow the code. There was no legally necessary reason for naming me personally in a third-party complaint or filing a separate federal action against the city. Rather than legal, these acts are political, especially in consideration of the timing, and were meant to incite the community against me, as well as personally incite me and to offend me, just as calling me an anti-Semite was meant to incite and offend me, as well as an effort to not only impugn my character and destroy my reputation, but in hopes that I would be so angry and offended that I would cause the city to abandon our efforts. While I am offended, I remain undaunted. I will discharge my duty, my oath of office to support and defend the law, and I will make sure the city stays the course. Meanwhile, the Alexander Schul defendants suggested a mediator, then rejected their own selection, then suggested another mediator who ultimately could not be scheduled. And now they're on their third suggested mediator, and difficulties in scheduling continue. This could be viewed as an effort to run out the clock, but no matter who sits in this chair, the obligation to enforce the law comes with the office. We will mediate the case. If we don't, it won't be because the city didn't do what it could to bring the parties to the table. A preliminary injunction hearing remains scheduled for December 3rd and December 6th. These have been rescheduled twice already to facilitate mediation. Eventually, the court will run out of patience, and the hearing will proceed if mediation does not. We have here tonight Paul Hugenberg. Mr. Hugenberg, are you here? I see him now. He's from Ray & Associates. He's here to update the city and present a working draft report on the IT study. So I will conclude my report now and turn to the agenda. Item A is a presentation and update from Ray & Associates on their IT work, assessment work, and a report to the city. Mr. Hugenberg, you have the floor if you would be so kind as to come up and come to the podium.
Thank you, you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council. Appreciate the opportunity for Ray to perform this project for the city. Before I begin, it's my understanding that everybody has a copy of the report given them today. It is in draft form for comments, so as we take questions today, or if you have any questions afterwards, please let me or the mayor know. We'll incorporate those and answer any questions you may have. As well, I want to make sure that the council is aware of our apologies at Ray for the length of time that this has taken. This generally does not take as much time as this exercise did. That's fully within our control. It doesn't have anything to do with the city's response or the responses from your current managed services provider. So my apologies for the time that this has taken. So in the report, you have a 14-page document that lists a summary section, a matter of detail related to the RFP requirements that you asked us to look at, and then we have a 5-year estimated pricing schedule on the back for remediation of the activities that are in the report. So what I'd like to do, if it's okay, is focus on the summary and on the budget, and then we can answer any questions, and the details can be reviewed and questions asked as needed. Is that appropriate?
I think that would be fine, Mr. Hugenberg. You may proceed.
Okay. So page 4 has the summary. And so generally what we find when we do a needs assessment with any type of organization is we approach this from a framework base. So the framework that we use is a government nonprofit framework, the National Institute of Standards and Technology Cybersecurity Framework, or NIST CSF. It is a mix of standard information technology practices as well as security practices for any type of organization that has sensitive data within its system, such as citizen data. So we use the NIST CSF framework, and in that we come to a couple of conclusions about what we expect to see and then the gaps from what we expected but did not see. I have 7 items to go over with the council today. The first is the actual implementation of that framework. So regardless of how you approach information systems or technology and the security of those systems, whichever vendor is chosen to do that or employee is assigned the responsibility, this framework will provide them an ability to communicate back to council the components or index of what it is that you want to expect to be covered, and then your application or adherence to that. The NIST CSF model is also maturity-based and complexity-based, so the city can right-size it without adopting too many stringent oversights that maybe a larger city or larger entity has. So my recommendation is that the city use the NIST CSF framework. Right now it is absent any type of framework to handle or manage its technology systems. Number 2, within any framework or any review, the most important thing to have in place are policies and procedures. They govern the activities of everything that happens thereafter, and we're asking that policies and procedures be drafted by the city to govern how IT is managed, purchasing decisions are made, what needs to be secured, and how it is secured. We can certainly help provide templates for the city to leverage if they like, but we're absent those today, and I think they need to be in place. Number 3, encourage you to engage in a formal contract with a managed services security provider. Based on our recommendation and what we generally see in the space is an engagement or a contract, typically multi-year, with a professional managed services provider, so you are outsourcing the management and oversight of IT, and it's ongoing 24/7, 365 monitoring. So that means your systems are up and available, and that means confidentiality is always watched, and any type of incidents or alerts are responded to in a timely fashion. At this size of an entity, it generally is less expensive, more cost efficient to use an outside provider than to establish a full-fledged IT department inside. Number 4, I'd like you to consider establishing a cloud-first approach to technology. So basically what this means is you can buy physical equipment and store them within city facilities, and everything stays in those physical pieces of equipment, or you can outsource this stuff to a cloud provider or own the equipment, but in a public data center. Benefit to this for the city is multiple protection layers, repeated budget and reinvestment into the technology, and you are leveraging the technology management and cybersecurity expense of that data center off the shoulders of the city. Number 5, perform periodic vulnerability scans on your environment. So frankly, about 97, 98% of all cybersecurity issues are the result of unpatched systems and vulnerabilities that last without remediation. This is a pretty easy fix. There are free tools to do this, and paid tools are quite inexpensive. So our recommendation is an ongoing and periodic review of your system vulnerabilities by an outside scan. Number 6, test your backups for recovery of systems and applications. Again, about 96, 97% of all issues that happen that eliminate availability of systems or potentially cause a breach are remediated by good backup media. So the backup of all of your significant data and the testing of the restoration ability of that backup data should occur on a frequent basis. We generally recommend every quarter a test is done of any backup media to make sure that it is available for the city. And finally, number 7, multi-factor authentication should be on every system that houses citizen data. So multi-factor, most people are used to this as I log into my bank account and I get a text on my phone and I need to put in that code in order to go any further. That is multi-factor. There are many ways to do that. We suggest performing that type of control activity on any application that has sensitive data, especially citizen data. Those are our 7 recommendations. They are supported throughout the next 12 or 13 pages with items that specifically speak to why we think those are important. But are there any questions on those 7?
Are there any questions with regard to those 7 points on pages 4 and 5?
Real quickly then, I'll go to the last page. So some of the conversation that we have had through the course of this project is, what is a review or kind of an estimated budget that the city would be looking at if it made the decision to hire an employee and spin up a full-time IT department on-site, on-premise, versus following some of the recommendations with going cloud first with an outsourced managed provider. So based on our review of our internal work with other cities, public information available off of itbenchmarking.com, we've come up with a couple of tables that we'd like to just make sure that you are aware of. One of them is fully on-prem, one of them is outsourced. So on page 13, we have a 5-year budget for a fully managed outsourced system, which includes management and security oversight, replacement of the PCs and laptops that you use inside the department, replacement of on-premise servers, use of cloud, use of retention-based, security-based Microsoft O365, telecom expense, cybersecurity insurance, and compliance needs. And we have a 5-year number of roughly $893,000 for 5 years. Conversely, an on-premise solution adds employee costs, removes cloud costs. With the same sections, we end up with a number that is roughly $952,000, or about a $60,000 difference over the course of 5 years from on-prem versus fully outsourced. Of course, these are subject to negotiation, and your estimates may vary if you go into the market. What we'd like to make sure that you understand is if you go outsourced, generally companies, and you guys are using one now that's a very good company, they have multiple people that are attending the systems at the same time with different skill sets, different professions, different levels of career tenure. If you hire somebody inside, you have one person looking at all the systems. And so while the difference may not be hundreds of thousands of dollars, the skill set and attention applied to the city is vastly different between outsourced versus on-prem. Generally, we don't recommend on-prem until you are significantly bigger than you are now. At this size, the cost and efficiency of an outsourced provider generally is better. Those are the 2 things I want to make sure we went over today. In the middle of the report, Mr. Mayor has most of the details supporting those findings. Is there anything else you'd like me to go over? Questions I can answer?
Well, only if there's something that members of council would like to go over at this time. I know they just got the report, and also this remains in draft form. And we have not yet brought this to the Tech Advisory Commission, which is where this would likely go next. I'm presuming that is what council would want us to do at that point. But I know there'd been a lot of interest with regard to where we were on the study, and I did bring up at the last meeting that we would get you an update. So Mr. Hugelberg is here for that purpose, and if there are questions for him, now would be the time. Mrs. Weiss.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I just had a couple questions. They're the same ones on page 13 and 14. What's telecom?
So those would be the connectivity to your internet or inter-office lines,
Okay.
network lines. That's
Okay,
what they
and
are.
then Are you aware, in terms of cybersecurity insurance, since we're a government agency, we probably have some savings as a group? Was this a standalone cybersecurity insurance? Because I know it could be
This will
significantly
be a
lower.
standalone, so you
Okay.
might have some negotiation room in there. Just so that you're aware, cybersecurity insurance is not going down.
Right.
It is generally going up at about 25% a year. So any negotiation or group kind of terms you could get would be favorable.
Okay, and then in terms of compliance, is this, obviously, whether it's outsourced or whether it's in-house, that person or company would be in charge of compliance, but what
That's
is the $15,000 number comprised?
So that would include things like your vulnerability scanning, would include things like PCI requirements for the credit card that the city takes. It would include things like making sure that any of your HIPAA coverage for any type of medical data on the systems are covered. And then there are some certain government regulations that are utility-related, FSMA-related, and then there are some security requirements over police systems, and this would cover all of those. Generally, it would be one exam that had just have a broad scope.
Yeah, because I think that there could be some savings with that also, but thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Couple questions, Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Gould.
Were there any recommendations that you made that, or considered for the network management portion or the cloud-supported servers portion that would have reduced the cost of the fully managed outsourced services?
So the
In those
fully
areas.
managed outsourced services are generally priced on a per-device basis, and this is estimated on about 50 devices. So there's some flexibility in there with how many devices the city has or what it grows into. Generally speaking, at a low end, for a managed provider that has security considerations with it, is about $125 per device per month. So this is based off of that number. So you can reduce that cost with negotiation. You may find somebody that is willing to go a little bit less, and you can obviously spend a lot more. This is kind of the industry average when you add security considerations. If you remove security considerations, you can knock about $50 a month per device off, but then you need to go find those solutions elsewhere.
And the cloud-supported servers?
So same thing, right? So cloud-supported services is going to be based on having a server in the cloud and then the amount of data that you send to it. And those generally are going to run somewhere in the $5,000 to $1,000 a month, depending on data. So again, there may be some negotiation points the city has that I'm not aware of, but the cheapest that we've been able to find is $500, and then the larger is one to get up into about $1,100, $1,200 a month.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
I do have one question, Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Rock.
Only because it's listed here. Well, under your fully managed, I'm sorry, no, the in-house, you have a on-premise server replacement of $26,000.
That's 3 servers.
So
4 servers, I'm sorry.
4 servers.
Yeah.
But on page 9, you list that your server assessment, that you don't see any operational inefficiencies outside the need to update the outdated or legacy server versions. So you're saying here that, I mean, what are you saying? Are you saying these servers are old?
So you have servers that you don't own, and some of them are a little bit old. And so to replace those would be roughly about $8,500 a server for a commercial grade server today. So that's 4 of them.
Okay.
Servers should last you somewhere between 7 and 8 years. So somewhere over the next 5 years, you're going to need to replace those servers. I just put it in year 1 so that those costs were captured.
I guess where I'm confused is I thought we replaced these servers already, like in the last year or two. What servers did we replace?
We have a rented server right now.
We have the
from
rented server.
Starfish, yes. So, yeah, I mean, that's beyond the scope of, I mean, Mr. Hugelberg knows that he saw what we saw and what he saw, and he's aware from working with Starfish that that is a server that they are renting to us.
So you're, in this table then, you're proposing that in lieu of renting the server, it's just a purchase server. That's the data that I'm looking at here?
Yeah, so straight up, you're going to need to make one of 2 choices. You're either going to need to purchase servers and own them as a city, and that's the number that you have.
The 26,000?
That's correct. That's 4 of them.
Okay.
Or you're going to need to use cloud-based services provided by a managed service.
Gotcha.
Okay. And then you own those servers from a license and subscription standpoint. They're not loaned to you, or rented temporarily. And the cost of those will be cheaper, and you'll also have contemporary services as well.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Hugelberg? Okay, very good. Well, thank you, Mr. Hugelberg, for coming here this evening. I do expect that what we'll be doing is referring the report to the Tech Advisory Commission. We do have a new co-chairs of that commission, and their next available date, they don't have a meeting currently scheduled, but Councilwoman Pardee, who unfortunately is not here this evening, has been working with the Tech Advisory Commission, and I'm sure that they will want to schedule a date forthwith to go over this and go over any further input. And council members, together with the commission, I'm sure will want to do that. That's why it's remaining in draft form.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a safe trip back. Okay, we will then move on to item B, which is the approval of Planning Commission recommendation approving the application from James Haas, AIA Westwork Architectural Studio, to demolish house at 2519 Claver Road in order to build a new house. Looks like the applicant is here. Would you state your name for the record, please?
Good evening. I'm James Haas. It's the Westwork Architectural Studio, 26161 Shaker Boulevard, Beechwood, Ohio.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Haas. Would you please proceed?
Okay. We've been before the Planning Commission and got unanimous approval for the demolition. What you have before you is a preliminary design, preliminary in the sense that we're waiting on approval for BZA. We need a variance for lot coverage. If we get through the BZA, we'll go to full drawings. It'll be a full submittal. So tonight we're hoping to get the demolition and kind of move the process forward.
Okay. All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Haas. Are there any questions for Mr. Haas? Mrs. Weiss.
Thank you. I just had a comment. I happened to have been at the Planning Commission meeting, and I'm going to echo Steve Sims, who used to be on council, where our housing stock is our most important asset in our city. And he was always, it hurt him whenever a house was torn down, for whatever reason it was. And I'm so happy that a new house is being put in place. So thank you.
And a beautiful home at that.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions for Mr. Haas?
Mayor, I'll just make a comment.
Yes, Mr. Rock.
I'm a voting member of the Planning Commission, as you know, so I was present in the meeting. I voted for the demolition of this home in order to build a new home. I'm excited about it. If you look at the packet, the rendering and the front elevation indicates it's going to be a beautiful home. I'm very excited to see that. It is going to Board of Zoning Appeals for a variance on lot coverage. The commission did discuss that at length, at what they could do to limit them from having to go get a variance, but at this point, because it is a first floor space issue, the amount of rooms and the size of each room on that first floor prohibit, I should say, it doesn't allow for a way around that variance unless you move something to a different level, which is not feasible. You're not going to put the kitchen on the second floor or the basement or the third floor. So it's something that's going to be very hard to get around in modern homes that are built in the 21st century. So we were unanimous in our support of the demolition in the new home, and I hope you guys vote the same way.
That is an issue in Cleveland Heights, Shaker Heights. It's the older housing stock. Even in a home at this level, and other outer suburb communities where I do homes, where there's more land for the house, you know, a 3-car garage is a minimum anymore. So trying to consolidate as best we could and still meet all the requirements. It is an issue with the older housing stock to try to meet, you know, today's contemporary needs.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Haas. And as a fellow voting member of the Planning Commission, I can confirm Mr. Rock said that we were unanimous, and yes, at that stage, I had a vote. I don't vote here this evening, but I did vote in support of this, and I'm hopeful also that the BZA will look favorably upon the request for the variance regarding the lot coverage issue. I know they will look at that carefully, as they always do. And I'm not here to substitute, you know, my judgment for theirs, but I do like the project. We like seeing new homes constructed in the city. And, you know, with our community reinvestment area here in the city that has promoted new construction and hopefully will continue to do so for some time to come. So thank you for your strong work here. Looks like a solid application. I thought so before. Looks like it should be a beautiful home and a welcome new addition to our community. So thank you for that.
And, okay.
Yes.
Mayor, I just wanted to add one more thing. The planning commission did put as a contingency, or as a, what would you call it?
Yeah, there's a
Thank you,
contingency.
Mr. Rock. I was going to.
And Mr. McConville can cover that.
Step in on this
Contingent
point.
on a development agreement with the city, because, and they have to
Yeah.
put up a bond, and it would go before the ARB and the BZA. That was part of the motion, and I would hope that the council considers that as part of their motion, that this go before the approval for a planning commission, ARB, and a development agreement with the city.
Thank you. We did a preliminary meeting with ARB, and it was the same thing. They were in favor. They said they would approve it as is. We need to submit, we'll go before them again because we need more drawings.
Yes, and we are approving a planning commission recommendation which does approve the application with those contingencies, I believe. So
Correct.
Unless we were to remove one of those contingencies as recommended, and I don't see any reason why we would, I would hope that we would not, then I believe that our approval would include those contingencies. Can you
That is
confirm
correct.
Thank you, Mr. McConnell. Okay. But also thank you, Mr. Rock, for noting for the record that there are contingencies.
Mayor.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Mayor.
Mr. Gould.
I know this is, as we've stated, kind of an issue for BZA, but it seems to be in communities like ours, which we're creating an environment where we are a place where people want to live. We have infill housing that's gone in, as the mayor has highlighted in previous presentations. We have a new home like yours that is going in, gorgeous, by the way. But there seems to be in communities that are further ahead of us, that started this, several years ago, maybe even a decade or so ago. It's like, oh, great, yeah, we have some interest. People really want to live here. We're doing the right thing. Oh my gosh, these houses are massive. Oh my gosh, that house is so close. I can see them, what they're eating for dinner in the house next door to me. All to say, sometimes the change requires an understanding and expectation of what it's going to feel like to live next to a beautiful home like that. It's wonderful. I want it in my neighborhood, right? But I wasn't quite clear from the drawings. Maybe it wasn't because it wasn't a BZA issue and that'll go before BZA.
Okay.
How close are you trying to build that to the houses next door?
We are within the current allowable setbacks.
Okay, so that's not the requirement that you're trying to change.
No,
I
it's
just
a
wanted
lot
to be clear.
coverage, the percentage of coverage of the land
Okay.
as it is. Yeah, the front yard, if we cover the porch, we would need a 5-foot front yard setback variance. There's a front
So when I
street.
heard coverage of land, I thought like expansion out in all directions.
Yes.
Your expansion is back to front?
Back to front, yeah, and it's the footprint, basically, of the garage, porches, and the house itself, collectively added together in proportion to the lot size. And
So you're
that's-
closer to the sidewalk than we allow and closer to the house behind you than you allow? than
No,
we
we're
allow?
within,
All of
the
them?
rear and the side yards, we're within
Okay.
city guidelines. In the front, we're within city guidelines. It's only a matter of if we cover the porch.
Thank you so
That's the
much. I
preliminary part of
misunderstood
this.
that.
Yeah, okay.
Yes,
Thank
and
you.
Without making editorial comment, just to flesh that out a little bit more, the requested land coverage variance is a variance of about 11% of the requirement.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Gould. Thank you, Mr. McConville. Are there any further comments, or is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay. Mrs. Blankfeld? Second. Okay, we have a motion to approve the Planning Commission recommendation approving the application of James Haas AIA Westwork Architectural Studio to demolish house at 2519 Claver Road in order to build a new house complete with the contingencies as passed by Planning Commission. That motion's been made by Mrs. Blankfeld. We have a second by Mr. Ertl. Is there any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry? Aye. Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Ertl?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Very good, thank you. Motion carries, and thank you, Mr. Ross, for being here, and we will see you at the BZA on Wednesday.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next item is item C, ordinance 2021-39, amending codified ordinance section 220.09 entitled Clerk of Council, Assistant Clerk of Council. This is on second reading. The sponsor, I believe, is Mrs. Weiss, in which case you would have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is just an updated ordinance to clearly identify responsibilities, supervisory responsibilities over clerk of council. That clearly identifies what council is responsible for and what the mayor is responsible for. This has been blurred forever. It's not just this administration, and this just clarifies it. There was one small correction, or update, I should say, from the first reading, where it says, upon request of the council, the mayor shall be obligated to attend and material or participate in conducting any such performance review. The previous language said and/or, and council felt that since council and the mayor both supervise the clerk, that they should both be present.
Okay, so that would be section 1.
E.
That would be letter E. So the and/or would be stricken in lieu and in place simply and. Okay. Anything further, Mrs. Weiss?
No, that's all.
Okay. Is there any discussion?
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Gould.
At the last meeting, you had raised several issues in addition to the attendance, and I think that's just an area where, I mean, frankly, for the reasons we talked about last time, I want you there. I think it's an appropriate change. But there were some other, in terms of the thresholds for notification and things like that you discussed, have those been resolved or addressed to your satisfaction?
They have not.
Okay.
I find this ordinance troubling. I believe that it impinges improperly on the charter. The clerk of council is council's employee. You have one full-time employee. The mayor has the rest of them. We manage our employees. You have one to manage. And I believe that the more appropriate thing to do here is to work on getting the clerk of council some assistance. If there is a dividing line between certain things that are seemingly administrative duties versus things that are council duties, that may be a good dividing line for what the assistant does versus what the main clerk of council does. There is nothing that prevents the city council now from reviewing or disciplining, if necessary, the clerk of council. This ordinance is not necessary to do that. And I also take exception to the idea that the council by ordinance would mandate the mayor to attend a performance review. That is something that I think, the mayor could do. I appreciate the idea of the mayor providing, material, but the idea that the mayor must attend a performance review of a particular employee and that it be done by ordinance, I think is improper. And I think it violates the charter. And if you pass this, I'll veto it.
And before, when we had the discussion last meeting, it seemed to be that there were more concerns regarding, what threshold of notification, but that in general, there wasn't, and you were accepting that you would participate or that you were fine with the other portions. It just was the details of how it occurred were at issue. But am I understanding correctly now that it is the idea that the mayor would have any function of supervision, oversight, and discipline of the council's clerk that you're taking issue with at all, irrespective of what the thresholds are?
I'm taking issue with this particular ordinance as it's been amended.
Sure. Are there certain terms that we could change that would still maintain the oversight, supervision, and disciplinary functions that we are highlighting here, are clarifying here, that would be acceptable to you? Because it seemed like you just said there weren't, but last time, my understanding that there was middle ground. I just want to understand where you're coming from.
We've had a number of discussions in executive session about the clerk of council. And, we're out here dancing around as if we're being somehow objective and making some objective ordinance, when in fact I know that the council's trying to put a switch in my hand and have me hit Kelly Thomas with it. And I have a real problem with that.
That's completely false, and.
That is absolutely true.
That is
First
completely.
of all, the idea that you would suggest that council was trying to have you switch a black woman
I know.
is just absolutely
Well, I think
unacceptable.
it's absolutely unacceptable that the highest-ranking African-American employee is being subjected to this discussion.
This has nothing to do with Mrs. Thomas and everything to do with council is not present on a day-to-day basis. There is literally no way to supervise any clerk, whether it's Mrs. Thomas or somebody else. We just need cooperation from the administration to be able to deal with supervising her during the day. Yes, we can review minutes, and yes, we can get agendas from her. We are not there when any clerk, are they there from the hours that they need to work? Are they getting their job done? Do they get along with their other employees? We can't do that. We need help with the administration, and this literally just outlines the collaboration and cooperation between the mayor and council.
And if there were an assistant clerk of council, that would still be somebody who would be working in the offices with you, as does the clerk. So hiring an additional employee, whether full-time or part-time, I don't see the difference. You would supervise that person, but not the person sitting next to them. I'm confused.
Well,
there.
currently, under the charter, an assistant clerk of council would be supervised by the clerk of council. You know, we're here by ordinance trying to make changes that rightly belong in a charter review or some sort of charter amendment.
Can I comment on that? I just
Please.
would offer my legal opinion to council and the mayor that the charter contemplates the delegation of council's authority to supervise this employee. So in subsection D, what you see is actually a give back of power from council to the mayor. Council has the right to hire and terminate the employment or otherwise discipline the clerk of council, and a portion of that power is being now delegated to the mayor, not in whole, but in part. And there's language in the charter that allows for that to occur. So that's number one. The question of compulsory attendance of the mayor at a meeting is a more interesting question. It raises what we in law school would call a constitutional crisis. If, for example, the mayor is asked to attend a meeting, there's a ordinance that has compulsory language, and then the mayor does not attend. That issue is not easily resolved. It would likely need to be resolved by the courts, and could be addressed by loosening the language either to have it indicate the mayor or designee shall attend, or keeping the and or provision that allowed for a little flexibility. I understand why the amendment was made and council's desire to have some, I think, both certainty and collaboration around this process. But do think that, you know, there is a constitutional question that's raised that's not easily resolved in sub E.
Did you, Mayor? May I?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Gould. Thank you. Thank you for asking to be called on first. Please proceed.
Since we've discussed executive session, I think you're right. I think we're kind of beating around some issues that we've discussed there and should probably place upon the record, because otherwise it seems kind of odd that council would be making an ordinance like this. Before I was even on council, the December prior to the time that my tenure started, we had a meeting where it was agreed that Luke would create a memo based on his analysis of the charter and analysis of the ordinances of the city of University Heights to understand where the delegation of authorities between the mayor, the administration, and the city council were when it came to supervision of its clerk. And Luke provided that analysis. There was what I understood to be an agreement between council and you about how that supervision was going to take place. And then later on, subsequent to that, that structure wasn't upheld, the memo was ignored, and we were back in a place where multiple individuals who were still inside, who were all inside of the same room, had differing understandings of what the agreement and memo were. And so we created another solution to that, which then didn't result in the type of collaboration that Luke just highlighted. And so here we are with an ordinance so that we have a clear understanding of what the expectation is. And if there are certain portions of that expectation that need to be, or that you would like to have amended, I'm certainly, again, as I stated last time, open to hearing what those are and then taking them into consideration. If it is, this is, as you've just said, this is your employee and you must supervise them as we supervise our employees, then I mean, I can't work with that because we've already had the analysis, the legal analysis from Luke, talking about how there is a delegation of authority from council back to the mayor for this specific purpose. And so I'm just concerned about whether or not we will find I think we will find ourselves back in the same place where if we don't have an ordinance, we won't have a clear understanding of what the expectation is for that delegation of authority. I certainly, to the points that Mr. McConville just made, do not want to run afoul of the charter or our ordinances. However, the law director is required to make an illegal analysis for every ordinance as to whether or not it violates the charters of the City of University Heights or is otherwise legally impermissible. And his signature is on each of the ordinances, and if he finds that there's a violation here, I assume that he will not sign off on that. Which is why when I hear him say, for instance, to the points that you've just made, compulsory attendance is an issue that we need to consider, I take Sue's point, I take Councilwoman Pardee's point very seriously, and I agree with it. I think based on the fact that in our system, the mayor assigns work to the clerk of council, will walk up to the clerk's office and say, do this thing, will require the clerk of council to complete essential functions of the administration's work, and that council will do some of the same, that the individual or the office holder, the mayor, who is present at City Hall where the clerk works, would participate in that employee's evaluation. I just don't understand why that wouldn't be part of the process. I think it's a best practice. And so for us not to have that requirement, I would need to be compelled or have a good reason, and I think Luke just raised it. I don't know that our charter allows us to compel the mayor's attendance at certain things. We had a very clear analysis of what our, we're a council who, 6 months ago, the mayor issued a memo, or several months ago, the mayor issued a memo instructing his directors not to participate in our meetings. And
That's not true.
The law director, it's absolutely true. And the law director had to write.
I posted a letter
an opinion.
about one
Mayor, I
particular
have the
committee.
floor.
And
You are
I'm
such
chairing
an
the meeting, and if
advocate.
you're going to lie about what
You
I
are
said, I
such an
am going to
advocate
call you
of
to
the
order.
procedural process, and I don't understand why you only use it as a bully pulpit when you see a reason to interrupt others or tell them that they have to get the floor. I have the floor, and I will cede it back to you when I'm through. I'm not out of order for stating my political understanding and opinion about the issue. I believe that it's supported by the facts and the record, both publicly and officially, and I will continue to make that statement because I believe it's accurate. If you disagree with that, when you have the floor back, you may say what you like. To that point, Mr. McConville has had to make an opinion that the directors of this city are in fact required to appear when council says so. And so when I hear him say, I don't think you have that same authority for the mayor, I take that into consideration, and I think that we need to amend the portion of this ordinance that compels the mayor to attend. Thank you. I'll give you back the floor.
I just want to clarify that I'm saying that's a question. It's unresolved. It's an issue, not You can't do it.
Okay, yeah, okay.
It's difficult to give a legal opinion about that because there just isn't any law that I can find on that.
But if the mayor objects to it, then if
But-
the mayor
but then-
objects to it and it's a
then
question
clearly,
of law.
then clearly there's an issue there, correct?
I think
And
unless
the-
we're on solid footing, we need to give deference to the mayor's opinion that like, this is not something that I want in here. And if he's saying, I'm not comfortable with this, and you're saying, I can't tell you that you're on solid footing because it's an unresolved question of law, I think this council, as a member of this council, will listen to your legal opinion that I don't know, and when there's an I don't know from my legal counsel, I'm going to listen to the mayor who's saying, I don't want to do it. Because frankly, as a practical point of view, if the mayor is not going to participate willingly in the evaluation and show up to this meeting, which he hasn't necessarily said he wouldn't, he just says he doesn't want to be compelled to do it, you know, I don't want an individual in the meeting who's going to sit with folded arms and say, well, I'm not compelled to participate, I only have to be here. You know, like, what is that going to get us? So, again, I support the removal of the portion that the mayor is highlighting, compelling him to appear.
And I'm fine with that, to get this
Go ahead,
passed in the
Mrs. Weiss.
spirit of collaboration because of all of the different reasons that we've said.
Okay, can I understand, are we now going to remove E?
We're not removing E, it would just be that the word obligated would be taken out.
Well, obligated, or would we be just reverting to the and/or? I mean,
We
I'm
had
unclear.
we had and/or originally.
Right, you had and/or originally. I'm unclear as to what the amendment is. Could you restate it, please?
So just for the law director to comment, would the word obligated to attend, or would just be and/or material or participate resolve the
Well,
question in the law?
You sort of can go by degrees here. One thing you can do is take out the whole sentence. Another thing you could do is say the mayor or designee shall be obligated, because that gives the mayor flexibility to designate, for example, the employee who takes care of HR functions to participate. Now, I'm not commenting on whether that would satisfy council. It's just an idea. The original language had and/or materially participate, since I think that you know, there could be hypothetical circumstances in which a mayor provides input to council in writing or otherwise in a manner that doesn't involve attendance at a meeting. All of those get kind of closer to a provision that's easier to defend.
So the and/or, I would like to revert it to how it was before, where it said and/or. Mayor, is that sufficient?
Well, I think the and/or is better than the and. I still have a problem with the ordinance generally. I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding as to the relationship that the mayor has with the clerk of council. I do not order the clerk of council to do things. I ask the clerk of council to do things because the clerk of council works for the council, and I respect that division of authority. I don't recall a time I've ever ordered Mrs. Thomas to do anything. I've always asked Mrs. Thomas if she would do something. And I don't want to put Mrs. Thomas on the spot, but I think if she looks back on the last 3.5 years, she knows that that's how I approach it. I want to respect the division of responsibilities between council and the mayor. I understand that council members aren't present all day long at City Hall. That's certainly not an excuse to not, or a reason not to have an opinion on something. So surely if that applied across the board, council wouldn't be able to have an opinion on much of anything. And of course, that shouldn't be the case. Of course, council has opinions on things. And council should be able to register those opinions and make decisions, even not being the full-time elected officials at the city. That said, there are things that I know that the council has taken issue with from time to time, and you've always had the authority to let your employee know that. And you don't need me for that. You don't need me to know whether or not you have a problem with how your clerk of council is doing. She's your employee. Mrs. Weiss.
Thank you. So we interact with Kelly all the time. The issue here is that we don't oversee civil service. We don't oversee BZA. We don't oversee planning. We don't oversee ARB. You do. And because of that, we have a shared responsibility of supervising the clerk of council. And that is why this is here, because as Councilman Gould mentioned in the past, we had a memo from the law director. And we've had multiple meetings about this, the last one which Mayor Franklin, you didn't attend. So we need this to just outline what the supervisory duties are. This should not be an argument, this should not be a fight, this does not go against our charter.
If I have a problem with how civil service is handled, with how ARB or BZA are handled, I'm in a position where I can let you know, as her employer, that there is a problem, so that you may deal with it. And I don't think we need this ordinance to take care of that.
Mayor, if I may, this ordinance is not for you or for Kelly. This is for the future of future clerks and future mayors. So while I appreciate you will come to us when there is an issue, be it that it is Ms. Thomas or a future employee in that position, this is to ensure that future clerks and future mayors have a collaborative experience with the city council.
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Gould.
Unless there's further discussion, I'd like to move to pass Ordinance 2021-39, amending codified ordinance section 220.09, entitled Clerk of Council, Assistant Clerk of Council.
Okay, we didn't actually take a, did we formalize the amendment, or do we need to make a motion on that? Or can you just do that by way of this motion, Mr. McConville?
Can I say as amended at the end of it, or do we need to make a motion to amend?
I don't think we do, because I think the agenda actually didn't reflect the amended ordinance that was just passed out this evening. So to clarify the record, you're passing the ordinances as it was presented initially and read on first reading, is now on second reading, and the last sentence includes the phrase and/or. Is that correct, Mr. Gould?
Specifically, the mayor shall be obligated to attend and/or materially participate in conducting any such performance review.
That would be the motion.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. We have a motion by Mr. Gould. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none. Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
No.
Mrs. Pardee? I'm sorry. Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Ertl?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Okay, ordinance passes. Next is item D, ordinance 2021-40, authorizing the mayor to enter into contract for public health services with the Cuyahoga County Board of Health for January 1, 2022 to December 31, 2023, and declaring an emergency. This is on emergency and on second reading. Just from we spoke about this extensively at the last meeting, and I don't know that we need to go over that again, but I would identify that there is a typographical error that we would want to rectify, and that is in section 1, and where it says that the General Health District of Cuyahoga County, Ohio hereby agrees to provide health services for the city of University Heights for the calendar year 2022, it says January 1, 2021 through December 31, 2023. That should say January 1, 2022 through December 31, 2023. Is there a motion to amend section 1 to so reflect that
Also
time
moved.
range? Okay, we have a motion by Mrs. Blankfeld. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Weiss. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Blankveld?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Erdl?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Okay, it is so amended. That said, there were other changes in Section 2 that are different from the Section 2 of the ordinances read on first reading. We did discuss at the last meeting what the amounts to be paid to the board would be. You know what? There's another version that was passed out, isn't there? I'm looking at the one that's in the packet. Okay, so looking at the one in the packet, there's a crossed out section in Section 2, and then highlighted in yellow, there's the annual sum of $83,484 for calendar year 2022, and a total annual sum of $91,832 and no cents for calendar year 2023. So just so everybody's clear, that is the version that we would have before us, and as amended, as just amended, so that the 2021 in Section 1 is actually a 2022. And the date range then is January 1, 2022 through December 31st, 2023. Are there any questions or discussion? And if not, is there a motion to adopt 2021-40 on emergency as amended?
Also move, Mayor.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Blankfeld on emergency to adopt. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Weiss. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll first? No, this is a second reading, so we only need to pass it by 5 votes. So, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Erdl?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Okay, very good. Motion carries, and 2021-40 is approved. Next on the agenda is Resolution E, or rather Item E, Resolution 2021-44, recognizing Stormwater Awareness Week and declaring an emergency. Stormwater Awareness Week did just begin this week, and the Cuyahoga Soil and Water Conservation District has asked the various communities around Cuyahoga County to recognize the week of October 17 through 23, 2021 as Stormwater Awareness Week. I want to go over some of these because the idea of promoting the awareness is to say these things out loud so that they are therefore promoted. So whereas urban stormwater runoff impacts water quality in the city of University Heights, and whereas population growth, residential and commercial development, and the resulting changes to the landscape will only increase stormwater quality and quantity concerns throughout Cuyahoga County. And whereas these impacts cannot be entirely avoided or eliminated, but can be minimized. And whereas it is currently recognized that control of stormwater quantity and quality is most effectively implemented when people and organizations understand the related causes and consequences of polluted stormwater runoff and flooding, and the actions they can take to control these. And whereas the need arises not only from the regulatory requirements of EPA general construction and municipal stormwater rules, but also from the recognition that citizens and local decision makers will benefit from a greater awareness of how the cumulative impacts of decisions at home, at work, and through local policies impact our water quality, storm corridors, and flooding. And whereas the development and implementation of effective outcomes-based stormwater education and outreach programs will meet the related federal stormwater pollution control requirements and those of the communities they serve, so that Cuyahoga County and the greater Cleveland region continues to be a green city on a blue lake. Now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the City of University Heights, Ohio, that Section 1, that the City of University Heights joins Cuyahoga Soil and Water Conservation District in recognizing the week of October 17 through 23, 2021 as Stormwater Awareness Week. Section 2 is the standard language then with regard to open meeting of council, and Section 3 that it's an emergency measure for public health, welfare, and safety of the city. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
Mayor, I'll move to adopt Resolution 2021-44.
Very good. We have a motion by John Rock to adopt on emergency.
On emergency.
Resolution 2021-44. Is there a second?
I'll second, Mayor.
Second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Any discussion?
Blankveld.
Yes, Mrs. Blankfeld. Did you have something?
No,
Oh,
just
okay.
advice.
Very good, thank you. Seeing no discussion, we'll take 2 votes. First is on the suspension. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry? Aye. Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Ertl?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
And then on the main motion?
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry? Aye. Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Ertl?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Okay, very good. Motion carries and the resolution is adopted. Next is item F, ordinance 2021-45, amending ordinance 2020-63, authorizing permanent appropriations for current and other expenditures for the city of University Heights, Ohio for the period commencing January 1, 2021 and ending December 31st, 2021, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Kennedy, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a amendment ordinance for the appropriations for 2021. We've talked about this the last several meetings. The net effect of the increases and decreases is approximately $81,000, and that's 0.4% change to the budget. We did have a number of areas that had to go slightly up, but I made decreases in community development, the finance department, the Shade Tree Fund, the Capital Fund, and the TIP Fund. The changes in the Capital and the Shade Tree Fund were to reflect the financing that we did for those vehicles, because we're only going to have one payment this year as opposed to paying the entire amount in cash. And then we're going to appropriate $45,800 for the Facilities Improvement Fund, which is the cost of the GPD contract that was approved by council to do the preliminary study. And that's pretty much it. There'll be one more appropriation amendment, I believe, at the end of the year. So pending approval of this, I'll get this filed with the county right away. And then we will do one more amendment in December. We have final numbers for the year.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Are there any questions for Mr. Kennedy?
Mayor, I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Rock.
Mr. Kennedy, I don't know if you have the same packet as we do. I have an attachment A here. Is that what you're referring to?
Right.
Okay, so what I'm looking at here, you have total budget. These are the amended numbers, or
Yes.
this is what's going to be budgeted with the amendment? So for instance, line 2, police, you have a total budget of $4,455,860. That's the budget amount with whatever we're amending, right?
Correct.
So which line items are we amending?
There's an amendment for dispatch because the capital costs were not included in the original budget for this year.
Okay.
The building department, we had to amend to provide appropriation for safe built for the remainder of the year, because when we originally set up the budget, that was based on us having full-time staff doing it. So it was our best guess as to what we were going to need. A small adjustment in community development on a negative, because we no longer have a part-time person employed in that. Finance department came down because of change in the pay structure of the department. I did amend to add for council the cost of the equipment that's been approved here that was not contemplated. The law department received additional appropriation because the added legal expenses related to the Alexander Schul case. That was approved by council as well. And then for the Shade Tree Fund, the TIF Fund, and the Capital Improvement Fund, we reduced those amounts, the original amounts. And again, that was to cover for Shade Tree and the Capital Fund the fact that we're only going to have one payment for the lease this year of the equipment as opposed to the whole $420,000 payment. The TIF Fund has to be modified down because of the collections did not meet the original estimate for the year. And we put $20,000 in the ARPA fund, which is what we talked about at the special meeting before the last council meeting. That was for potentially for the food banks. And then $45,800, which was the amount of the GPD contract for the city center review. That'll get charged to the Facilities Improvement Fund, so I had to appropriate that money in that one.
Thank you.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion to approve by Mrs. Weiss on emergency?
Oh, I'm sorry, on emergency.
Yes, and on emergency by
Yes.
Mrs. Weiss, and that's second by Mrs. Berry. Is that right? Was that Mrs.
Yes.
Berry, the second? Okay. Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas will take 2 votes. First is on the suspension of the rules.
Mrs. Blanco?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry? Aye. Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Erdl?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
And on the main motion.
Mrs. Blanco?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Erdl?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is item G, a motion to accept bid from the Greenleaf Group, Inc. for the 2021-2 fall tree planting contract is the lowest and best bid in an amount not to exceed $14,720 and authorizing the mayor to enter into contract for the same. Mr. Picorni, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. This is our annual fall tree planting program. We went out for bids on Friday, October 1st. We received 2 bids, one from Greenleaf Group and one from Johnson's Landscaping. Both of these companies have performed the tree planting in the past and have both performed fine. Greenleaf Group was the low bidder at $14,720, and I'm recommending that we go with them for the planting of the 46 trees in the contract.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Picorni. Any questions for Mr. Picorni? Seeing none, is there a motion to accept the bid from Greenleaf Group?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Erdl. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Rock. Any discussion on the motion?
I'd like to say something. I
Yes,
think
Mr. Erdl.
this is one of the best things the city does. Other than just making it generally appealing, there are other aspects to it, with the canopy and all those sorts of things. I just really appreciate what you're doing. It's a great program, the way you manage it also.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Erdl. I couldn't agree more, and it's worth mentioning. It is one of the finer things that we have in University Heights. For over 40 years now, we've been a Tree City USA because of the long-standing commitment of this community to its urban canopy and into the trees and to this kind of program. And we continue to build on it. Appreciate the strong work of Mr. Picorni and our arborist and of the continuing support of City Council to make this program happen. Any further discussion? We have a motion, right? Okay, very good. Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll?
Mrs. Blanco?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Erdl?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Very good, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Picorni. Next is item H, motion to accept Ohio EMS equipment grant in the amount of $2,632.78. Chief Perko, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. This grant is put on by the Ohio Department of Public Safety, Division of EMS. They do it annually. Each year we apply for it. Typically, we're awarded about $3,000. This year, we were awarded $2,632.78. There's no match for this grant, and we are looking to continue using the funds to replace our ballistic vests and helmets that we have on a 5-year rotation cycle as we continue to work with our local law enforcement in the Cuyahoga County Office of Emergency Management with our active threat and rescue task force training. Therefore, I'm respectfully requesting that we approve accepting the 2021-2022 Ohio EMS grant.
Very good. Thank you, Chief Perko. Any questions for Chief Perko? Is there a motion?
Also move, Mayor.
Motion by Mrs. Blankfeld to accept Ohio EMS equipment grant in the amount of $2,632.78. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Berry. Any discussion? Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blanco?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Erdl?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Motion carries. We now move to item I. Motion to accept regional fiscal year 2020 FEMA AFG grant contribution. Chief Perko.
Thank you, Mayor. This FEMA grant is the Assistance to Firefighter Grant that we also typically apply for and were recently awarded this year. This grant initiative comes out of the Cuyahoga County Fire Chiefs Association. They have been collaborating to apply for a grant approximately 4 years now. On a prominent shortcoming that we found, which would be an all hazards rehab and command support unit. We found that through the National Institute of Safety and Health, that it's a piece of equipment that we're lacking in this region, and definitely a need to meet standards on rehab as well as command out in the field. During this particular grant, 31 communities collaborated into the grant process, and we were awarded this purchase. So this vehicle will house a bunch of mobile communications equipment as well as rehabilitation for first responders. In addition to it being available to the 31 communities that participated in the grant, it's also being used regionally through mutual aid efforts, as well as through interstate emergency response coordination, as well as out of the state. Should a governor of a particular state sign a declaration of a natural disaster, this vehicle could also respond out of the state to provide assistance. The total project for this award was $499,950. The city of Pepper Pike is the host of the grant. They're the community that is accepting it and also being the fiduciary. FEMA contributed $454,500 to the project, and there was a 10% match totaling $45,450 from those 31 communities. Therefore, our obligation from University Heights would be $1,466.13. Likely to be paid out next year. We're also hopeful that the county would assist us as well as the other 30 communities in providing those matching funds. Therefore, I am respectfully requesting that we approve entering this agreement along with the 31 other cities to allow the city of Pepper Pike to host this grant and approve this purchase.
Okay, very good. Mrs. Weiss.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. I just had some, I guess, clarifying questions, just so I understand what exactly, this vehicle is, obviously, it's a large vehicle that will be dispatched to large fires, or like, what precipitates it being dispatched, and who gets priority, where is it housed?
At the time, Pepper Pike is going to be housing it. That could be changed in the future. I know there's some discussion about making it possibly more central. As far as a request, it would just be made through dispatch by the incident commander of any emergency incident. Although it may seem prominent that it would be a larger scale emergency, certainly a smaller incident on an unusually warm or cold day could also warrant the request just to have our responders in a vehicle like this that are out of the elements.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Sure.
Very good, thank you. Any other questions for Chief Perkin? If not, is there a motion to enter, or excuse me, a motion to accept regional FY 2020 FEMA AFG grant contribution?
So moved.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Berry. Is
I'll
there a second?
second.
Second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Any discussion? Mrs. Thomas, you may call the roll.
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry? Aye. Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Erdl?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Chief Perko.
Thank you.
Next item is item J, a motion to enter executive session for the purpose of discussing legal proceedings, personnel, and real estate matters. I understand there are two matters to enter into executive session over. One regarding a real estate matter, one regarding legal proceeding. And I think there's a little, well, I think we can just leave it at that. Is that acceptable, Mr. McConville?
Yeah, I mean, the real estate matter pertains to University Square. The litigation matter pertains to Alexander Schul.
Very good. That does clarify that for the public. Is there a motion to do that at the conclusion of the regular portion of the meeting?
Also move, Mayor.
Okay, very good. There's a motion by, was that Mrs. Berry or Mrs. Blankfeld? I couldn't.
Blankfeld.
Blankfeld. Motion by Mrs. Blankfeld. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Rock. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Erdl?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Very good. We will have an executive session at the conclusion of the meeting. We now move to director's reports. Finance, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of small points. I did send out this afternoon an updated expense report through the month ending September 30th, and also sent the statement of cash position through September 30th. If you remember the last week or so, we sent out all the revenue information and the updated investment information through the end of September. A couple of highlights. At the beginning of the year, our unexpended balance was $5.37 million. At the end of September, it is $6.38 million. So that increase of just over $1 million is primarily due to the fact that our net revenue exceeds our net expenses for the year by that similar amount. As I noted in the email, I did charge off $145,000 of police pension costs and $120,000 of fire pension costs in September to the police and fire pension funds. As you remember, last year we were able to boost the contribution levels of those via tax collections by realigning where the tax monies went to. So that's $265,000 that does not have to be absorbed by the general fund. On an all funds basis, at the beginning of the year, we were slightly over $9 million as the beginning balance. At the end of September, we're at $12.1 million as unexpended balance. That is in large part due, as I said, to the revenues exceeding the expenses. We also posted the ARPA money, which is $670,250 in September as well. So if anybody has any questions on any of the documents that were sent out either last week or today, please get in touch with me. But you should be all up to date for the first 3 quarters of 2021.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Kennedy? Okay. Thank you. We will now move to Director of Law, Mr. McConville.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Gould.
Was there any updates that you had on the tax?
Could you speak into the microphone, please?
Were there any issues or any updates that you had on the tax issues that you discussed regarding income tax?
In terms of, Mr. Gould, the Rita's new estimates, I have not gotten any new estimates as to the potential
impact of the state legislation.
Right. Okay. That's still supposedly coming the first week of November.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Gould. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. We'll now move to Director of Law, Mr. McConville.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll reserve my report for executive session.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. McConville. Public Safety, Police, Chief Rogers. Okay, no report tonight. Public Safety, Fire, Chief Perko.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, one item to report. October, we are still continuing to flush and flow test our fire hydrants. Primarily, we'll be operating on the east side of the city from this point for the duration of the month. I did receive an inquiry today about a possible water main leak on South Green between Churchill and Groveland. That is indeed a water main break
and Cleveland Water has been notified, so they should be out soon to fix it. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Chief Perko. Any questions for Chief Perko? Seeing none, we'll move on then to, thank you, Chief, to service, Mr. Picorni.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Only 2 items to report on. The household hazardous waste and shredding event will be coming up at the time change weekend, November 5th and 6th. So on Friday, November 5th, we'll be accepting things at the service garage from 8 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And on Saturday, September 6th, we'll be running the event at the service garage from 9 o'clock in the morning until 1 in the afternoon. And the shredding truck will be on site at that time.
November 6th?
November 6th.
Thank you, sir.
Second item, curbside leaf collection started today. The machine was out. We were working in the area on the west side of Warrensville. And we'll continue that area before we move to the east side.
Okay.
That concludes my report.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Picorni. Are there any questions for Mr. Picorni? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Picorni. We will then proceed to building. Is Mr. White here? Okay, very good. Then we will go to housing, community development. Mr. Engelbrecht, if you have anything also to add on behalf of building, please do.
Nothing to add on behalf of the building department at this time. The housing department received, again, over 25 calls a day from folks in the city. Housing department conducted 46 point-of-sale inspections, 33 rental inspections, and 6 lawns were cut from concerns within the community. On the community development side, we did submit for the TLCI grant through NOACA for the amount of $256,230. We should know within the next week or so when we will be presenting to NOACA in regards to that grant. I have nothing else. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Engelbrecht. Are there any questions for Mr. Engelbrecht? Seeing none, thank you. We move on to the city engineer, Mr. Chuney. Thank you, Mr. Chuney. Communications and civic engagement, Mr. Cook.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Apologize for honestly just getting here, but family issues, logistics with my son's football, and my wife and daughter couldn't pick him up because they are currently downtown for Harry Styles. So I appreciate your patience with that. Fall Fest was a success. I'm very proud of my ability to predict and control the weather. Had a beautiful fall day. Hopefully we'll have that on October 2nd, 2022. A lot of people to thank, everyone involved in it. The vendors all seemed happy. Most importantly, members of the community and surrounding communities seemed happy with the event. So very happy with that. So I guess that's it.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Cook. Any questions for Mr. Cook? All right, seeing none, thank you. Economic development, Mrs. Drucker is tending to a family matter this evening, a bit of an emergency and could not be here, and we hope everything will be okay. Which brings us now to reports from standing committees.
Excuse me, Mayor, did we have a report from police?
I'm sorry?
Was there a report from police?
He said there was no report.
No report? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next from the standing committees, building and housing, Mrs. Blankfeld.
Mrs. Thomas is continuing to poll. We expect to have a meeting of our committee within the next 2 weeks. The plan is to discuss and clarify the appropriate facilitation of the city's point of sale inspection program.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mrs.
You.
I'm sorry?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Community outreach, Mrs. Purdy is not here. Does anybody from the committee have a report? If not, then we will go to economic development. Mr. Rock.
No report, Mayor.
Okay, no report. Thank you. Finance, Mrs. White.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We will start the budgeting process in November. There'll be a poll going out in the next 3 weeks or so.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mrs. Weiss.
I'm sorry, we'll be starting the budgeting process in November.
Thank you. Recreation, Mr. Erdl?
No report, Mayor.
Okay, no report. Thank you, Mr. Erdl. Safety, Mrs. Berry.
We need to reschedule our safety committee meeting. It got canceled because the chief couldn't attend, and so Doodle needs to go.
Okay. Very good. I know there was some difficulty hearing that. The safety committee meeting had to be canceled due to the chief was ill, and thus we are polling for a new date for the safety committee meeting. Okay, very good. Thank you, Mrs. Berry. Service and Utilities, Mr. Gould.
Thank you, Mayor. Just prior to this meeting, the Service and Utilities Committee had a meeting to discuss any recommendation regarding the collection of solid waste in the University Heights, and voted unanimously to recommend to council to maintain the current method of collection within the city. Nothing further at this time.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Gould. And finally, Committee of the Whole, Mrs. Weiss.
No report, Mayor.
Okay, very good. This concludes the regular portion of the meeting. We do have a motion to go to executive session. We do have a room here where we do that, so you are welcome to stick around if you want to see us come back from that executive session and go back onto the record. I do not at this time anticipate a motion following this executive session. And of course, if there is one, well, then we will be making, record of it. So we will recess at this time so that we may go to executive session, and then we will come back onto the record, presumably to entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. Our next regular meeting will be November 1st. Yes, November 1st, Monday night. Thank you, 7 p.m. Mike, just let me know when we're up. Oh, okay, very good. Is there a motion to return to regular session?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Gould, second by Mr. Rock. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Wakefield?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Erdl? Aye. Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Very good, we're back into regular session. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Gould, second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Wakefield?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Erdl? Aye. Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Very good, motion carries. Next regular meeting is Monday, November 1st at 7 PM. We are adjourned.